Emma Whitfield was 34 years old, the ninth time her husband Robert packed a suitcase for his annual Family Week, a trip he'd taken every October for 9 years without ever once giving her an address. She always let it go. Robert called her sensitive when she asked questions, said his family was private, said she wouldn't understand. This year, after his flight took off, Emma opened an old tracking app neither of them remembered was still shared between their phones. His location wasn't the city he'd told her. It was 2 states away, in a neighborhood she'd never heard him mention, at an address that had apparently known him far longer than 1 week a year. Robert believed his secret was airtight. He believed she was home, exactly where he'd left her. He had no idea Emma was already boarding a flight of her own. What she found at that address would change everything, but she hadn't even landed yet. Before we dive in, comment where you're watching from today, and if stories like this speak to you, hit subscribe, because tomorrow's story is even more intense. The suitcase was open on the bed again. Emma Whitfield stood in the doorway of their bedroom and watched her husband fold a navy Henley into a neat rectangle. He always packed the same way. Shirts first, then pants, then the small leather dop kit he kept on the top shelf of his closet. Same order every time. She had watched him do it 8 times before this. She knew the ritual better than he probably realized. "You need the gray sweater," she said. "It's supposed to drop into the 40s up there by Wednesday." Robert looked up and smiled. That smile, wide and easy, the kind that had made her say yes to a second date 11 years ago in a noisy bar on Clement Street. "See? This is why I keep you around," he said. He winked. She smiled back. She went to the dresser and pulled out the sweater. Emma Whitfield was not the kind of woman who fell apart. At work, she ran a logistics operation that moved freight across 6 time zones. She managed a team of 22 people. When a shipping crisis hit, a missed connection, a lost container, a vendor going dark at 11 p.m., her team called her. Not the other directors, her. Because Emma did not panic. She found the problem, mapped the solution, and got everyone moving in the right direction before most people had finished reading the alert email. She was precise. She was patient. She was, as her boss Gerald had said at her last review, exactly the kind of person you want in the room when things go sideways. But here, in this bedroom, watching Robert zip his dop kit, she had spent 9 years being told she was too sensitive. It had started small. The first October, they'd only been married a year. He mentioned a family gathering, cousins, aunts, the kind of loud, extended family event that happened every fall on his father's side. She had offered to come. He'd kissed her cheek and said it was a whole thing, that his family was a lot, and that she would hate it. He would be back in a week, he promised. She had believed him. By the 3rd year, she had stopped offering to come. By the 5th, she had stopped asking for details, not because she didn't want them, but because every time she pushed even a little, Robert would tilt his head with that patient, practiced look and say something like, "Emma, not everything is a puzzle to solve," or, "You always do this, you spiral." And somehow the conversation would end with her feeling like the problem. She had never once been given an address. Not a phone number for the aunt or the cousin hosting, not even a city that she could have found on a map and pointed to and said, "There, that's where he is." She had the name of the state, Georgia. That was all. "Your mother called yesterday," Emma said, smoothing the sweater into the suitcase corner. "Yeah, I'll call her on the drive to the airport." She seemed, Emma paused, choosing the word carefully, scattered, like she was trying to remember something. "She's 61, not 90, Robert laughed. "She's fine." Emma had spoken to Odessa Whitfield every week for 9 years. Odessa was warm on the surface, always asking about Emma's work, always sending birthday cards with handwritten notes inside. But whenever Emma had gently asked about the October trip, about who exactly Robert stayed with, about whether she might ever be welcome to join, Odessa's warmth would go a little thin, like a light dimming behind glass. "Oh, you know how that side of the family is," she would say. "Very private people, very set in their ways." Emma had let it go, every time. She handed Robert a pair of dark wool socks. He dropped them into the front pocket of the suitcase and reached for his phone on the nightstand. The screen lit up before he touched it. Emma saw it from 3 feet away. A text notification, a preview of the first line, a name she didn't recognize. He swiped it dark in one fast motion. Not frantic, practiced. The move of someone who had done it before. "Work thing," he said, without looking up. She said nothing. 20 minutes later, she stood at the living room window and watched the Uber pull away from the curb. Robert had hugged her at the door. He smelled like the cedar soap she had bought him. He told her he'd call every night. He kissed her once, then again, and said, "I'll be back before you know it." She stayed at the window until the car turned the corner and disappeared. Then she went to the kitchen counter where her phone was charging and opened an app she hadn't touched in over 2 years. A location-sharing tool she and Robert had set up early in their marriage, mostly for safety, mostly forgotten. She almost didn't look, but she did. The blue dot that was Robert's phone was moving steadily through the city, and it was heading in exactly the opposite direction from the airport. Emma did not sleep. She lay on her side of the bed and stared at the ceiling and listened to the silence of a house that felt different now. Not empty, wrong. Like a familiar room where someone had moved all the furniture 2 inches in every direction. Nothing you could point to, everything slightly off. At 4 a.m. she got up, went to the kitchen, and made coffee she didn't drink. She sat at the counter with her phone and pulled up the tracking app again. The blue dot was stationary. It had stopped moving late the night before, settled into a quiet neighborhood in a city called Macon, Georgia. Not Atlanta, not anywhere near the vague, general Georgia Robert had always referenced. A specific place, a street, a house. She looked at the dot for a long time. Then she opened a browser tab and booked a flight. She called Yolanda from the rideshare on the way to the airport. Yolanda Price had been her best friend for 11 years, since a statistics class in college where they'd been assigned to the same study group and had bonded over the fact that the other 3 members never showed up. Yolanda was an accountant now, precise and no nonsense, the kind of person who could look at a column of numbers and feel something like emotion. She understood systems. She understood when something didn't add up. "Say that again," Yolanda said. "I booked a same-day flight to Macon." A pause. "Emma?" "His phone went the wrong direction, yo. I checked it twice. He never went to the airport." Another pause, longer. Emma could hear Yolanda breathing, thinking, probably sitting forward in whatever chair she was in. "Okay," Yolanda finally said. "Okay. Who else knows?" "Just you." "Good. Keep it that way." Her voice shifted, sharper, more focused. "Text me your flight number. And Emma? Don't do anything until you know exactly what you're looking at." "I know," Emma said. "I mean it. Not a word. Not a knock on a door. Nothing until you know." "I know," Emma said again. And she meant it. The flight was 2 hours. Emma spent most of it with her hands flat on her thighs and her eyes on the window. She wasn't crying. She wasn't spiraling. She was doing the things she did when a crisis landed in her lap at work. She was mapping, thinking in straight lines. What do I know? What do I need to know? What do I do with it once I have it? She picked up a rental car at the airport, a silver sedan, anonymous, forgettable. She typed the app's coordinates into her phone's GPS, pulled out of the lot, and drove. The street was called Birchwood Lane. It was the kind of neighborhood that didn't announce itself. Small yards with old trees, driveways with minivans, a basketball hoop at the end of the block, slightly crooked. The kind of place where people knew their neighbors' dogs by name. Emma drove the length of it once, slowly, before she found the house. It was modest, a 1-story ranch with a covered porch and dark green shutters, a flower bed along the front walk that someone had actually tended, not overgrown, not dead, but cared for. There was a child's bike leaning against the porch railing, red, with yellow handlebar tassels that moved a little in the October breeze. She almost kept driving. She didn't. She pulled to the curb across the street and 2 houses down, cut the engine, and looked. The mailbox was at the end of the front path, black metal, the kind with raised lettering. She could read it clearly from where she sat. Whitfield. And beneath it, in the same engraved font, Boyd. Whitfield Boyd. Emma's hands stopped working for a moment. She placed them on the steering wheel and made herself breathe. In, out. She looked at the front window. There were photos in it, framed prints arranged on what looked like a windowsill or a low shelf just inside the glass. She could see them even from here. She pulled her phone up and used the camera to zoom in, and what she saw made the breath leave her body slowly, like air from a tire going flat. Robert at a birthday party, grinning, a little boy in a party hat held up on his hip. Robert at a Christmas tree, wrapped in a red flannel shirt she had never seen, a woman beside him with natural hair and a wide smile and tinsel in her hands. Robert in a hospital room, unmistakably a delivery room, standing next to a bed, holding a newborn, his face cracked open with something that looked, God help her, like pure joy. Emma lowered the phone. She sat very still, the kind of still that wasn't calm, the kind that was something holding itself together by pure will. This was not a hotel. This was not a cousin's house. This was not a men's retreat or a family thing or whatever careful, vague, practiced answer he had given her for 9 years. This was a home, a lived-in, tended, loved home, with a mailbox and a bike and photographs in the window. She put the car in reverse and eased it around the corner, out of sight. She parked. She turned the engine off. She sat. And then the front door opened, and Robert stepped out, laughing, easy, unbothered, with a woman on one side of him and a small boy running ahead of them both. Robert didn't look around. That was the thing that struck Emma most. He didn't scan the street, didn't glance over his shoulder, didn't do any of the small, careful things a man with something to hide might do. He walked to the car in the driveway, a dark blue Honda SUV she had never seen, and lifted the boy up onto his shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. The boy shrieked with laughter. The woman, Rochelle, smiled and said something Emma couldn't hear, and Robert laughed, and then he set the boy down and popped the trunk. Groceries. He had been out for groceries. Emma watched him carry bags up the front walk. 2 trips. He handed a lighter bag to the boy, who carried it with both hands very seriously. Rochelle held the door open. The 3 of them went inside, and the door closed behind them. Emma sat with that image for a moment. Then she picked up her phone and started documenting. She was methodical about it. She had always been methodical. It was the thing her team at work depended on, the reason her department ran cleaner than anyone else's. She did not let herself feel anything she couldn't use. Not yet. She opened her notes app and started a new document, titled it with a date, and began building a timeline. 10:14 a.m. Subject arrived on foot from north end of Birchwood Lane, accompanied by woman, approximately early 30s, natural hair, medium height, and male child, approximately 4 to 5 years old. Carried groceries from dark blue Honda SUV, Georgia plates. She photographed the SUV. She photographed the license plate. She photographed the mailbox from 3 different angles using the zoom on her phone, making sure Whitfield Boyd was sharp and readable in every frame. She photographed the house itself, the address numbers beside the door, the tended flower bed, the child's bike with its yellow tassels. Around noon, Robert came back outside with the boy. They played in the yard for almost 40 minutes. Robert kicked a rubber ball back and forth, crouched down to the boy's level, helped him line up a shot toward a small plastic goal. At one point, the boy fell, and Robert was there in 2 steps, picking him up, checking his knee, saying something that made the boy stop crying and laugh instead. Emma took photos of all of it. Her hands were steady. Her jaw was tight. There was something sitting in the center of her chest that she refused to name yet. She had named it 9 years of Octobers. She had named it, he said it was just family. She had named it, I must be too sensitive. She wasn't naming it yet. She was working. 12:03 p.m. Subject and child played in front yard for approximately 40 minutes. Woman visible through kitchen window. 1:47 p.m. Curtains drawn. No exterior activity. 4:22 p.m. Subject visible on porch, on phone call. Duration approximately 8 minutes. She noted the time of that call carefully. She would check it against their shared phone plan later. By the time the October sky had gone dark orange and the streetlights had clicked on, Emma had 43 photographs and 2 full pages of notes. She had what she came for. More than she came for, if she was honest. She started the car and drove. The motel was on the far side of town, a budget chain, the kind with exterior corridors and ice machines that hummed too loud. Emma checked in under her own name. She paid with her own card. She carried her small bag up to room 114, closed the door, and sat on the edge of the bed. The curtains were thin. A strip of parking lot light came through the gap. She sat with it, finally. All of it. Every October for 9 years, her husband had told her he was spending a week with family, and she had packed his bag and kissed him goodbye and gone to work and eaten dinner alone and told herself she was fine with it, that it was just how his family did things, that she was maybe, probably, being too sensitive. Every October, she had shrunk herself a little smaller to make room for a lie she hadn't even known she was making room for. She hadn't been too sensitive. She had been exactly right. Emma sat with that for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called Elijah. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, you okay?" "I need your help," she said. Her voice was calm, level, the voice she used in boardrooms. "I found something today. Something big. And I need to know how to build a case that nobody can argue with." A pause. She could hear him shifting, sharpening. "Tell me what you found," Elijah said. "All of it," Emma said. "Or I can start with the mailbox." Emma landed at Hartsfield-Jackson 2 days before Robert was due home. She took a cab from the airport. She stopped at the grocery store. She bought the things they always kept in the house: coffee, eggs, the good bread Robert liked from the bakery section. She put them away in the kitchen and stood there for a moment in the quiet, looking at the refrigerator, looking at the photos they had stuck to it with magnets over the years. A trip to Savannah, a work party, a photo of Robert with his arm around her at a cousin's wedding, both of them squinting into the sun and laughing. She had always loved that photo. She left it where it was. Robert came home on a Thursday evening. She heard his key in the lock and looked up from the couch where she was reading, or pretending to read. She'd been on the same page for 40 minutes. "Hey, you," he said, setting his bag down inside the door. "Hey." She set the book aside and smiled. "How was the trip?" "Good. You know how it is." He came over and kissed her cheek. He smelled like the same shampoo he always used. "Mom says hi." "Tell her I said hi back." Emma stood, stretched. "There's food. I was going to make pasta." "Perfect." He was already moving toward the bedroom with his bag. "Let me get changed." She stood in the kitchen and listened to him move through the house, the familiar sounds. The closet opening, the dresser drawer, the sound of him dropping his shoes in the corner the way she had asked him 100 times not to. She turned on the stove. She met Elijah the following Saturday at a coffee shop 20 minutes from her office. Neutral ground, nothing that could look like anything to anyone who might be watching. He was already there when she arrived, a black coffee in front of him and his laptop open. Elijah was tall and lean, with close-cut hair and the kind of steady, unhurried energy that had always made Emma feel like things were going to be handled. He had been telling her for years, careful, low-key, never pushing, that something about Robert didn't add up. She had always changed the subject. She sat down and pulled a manila folder out of her bag. 43 photos, she said, sliding it across to him. 2 pages of notes, timeline, license plate, the mailbox, all of it. Elijah opened the folder and looked through the photographs slowly. He didn't rush. He stopped on the mailbox photo for a moment, then on the one of Robert and the boy in the yard. He closed the folder. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll run the property, the plate. I'll look into Rochelle Boyd and find out how long she's been at that address." He folded his hands on top of the folder. "Emma, I need you to hear me on something." "Go ahead." "This may not stop at an affair." His voice was even, careful. "If his name is on anything, a deed, a mortgage, a utility account, then what you're looking at isn't just a betrayal. It's a financial structure, and those take time to unwind properly." Emma nodded once. "You go in too early," Elijah said, "and he moves things, closes accounts, lawyers up before you have the full picture. You need to be patient." "I know." "I mean it. I know what you want to do right now." "Elijah." Her voice was quiet, firm. "I have been patient for 9 years. I think I can manage a few more weeks." He looked at her for a moment. Then he nodded and picked up his coffee. "A few more weeks," he agreed. She went home. She went to work. She had Monday stand-ups and quarterly forecasts and a staffing issue in the Memphis hub that took 3 days to untangle. She answered emails. She ate lunch at her desk. She came home and cooked and watched television and said, "How was your day?" and "The pasta's in the oven," and "I think it's supposed to rain tomorrow." She was very good at it. She had always been good at holding things together while something broke quietly underneath. The difference now was that she was the one doing the breaking. Elijah called on a Tuesday night, just after 9. Emma stepped out onto the back porch to take it, pulling the door shut behind her. "I've got the property record," he said. The October air was cold. Emma pulled her cardigan tighter. "The house on Birchwood Lane," Elijah continued. "Deed was filed 6 years ago. 2 names on it." A pause. "One of them is Robert's." Emma stood very still. The yard was dark. Somewhere down the street a dog was barking. "He's a co-owner," Elijah said. "Has been for 6 years." Emma breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. "What else do you need to pull?" she asked. Emma texted Yolanda that same night. "Can you come over Thursday? I need help looking at something financial. Don't tell anyone." Yolanda's reply came back in under 2 minutes. "I'll bring wine." Yolanda Price had been Emma's best friend since their 2nd year of college, when they had been assigned to the same study group and discovered they were the only 2 people in the room who had actually done the reading. She was sharp and direct, the kind of person who said exactly what she meant and expected the same in return. As a corporate accountant, she had spent 15 years reading financial statements the way other people read novels, looking for the twist, the hidden detail, the place where the numbers stopped making sense. She arrived Thursday at 7 with a bottle of red wine and her work laptop under her arm. She took one look at Emma's face and put the wine on the counter without opening it. "Okay," she said. "Show me." They sat at the kitchen table. Emma laid out the joint account statements she had printed from the bank portal. 2 years of them, the most recent ones, the ones she could access without raising flags. She had been careful. She had logged in from her phone on a different network, downloaded the PDFs, and printed them at the copy shop 2 miles from her office. Yolanda put on her reading glasses and spread the pages out flat. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of paper sliding across the table and the occasional scratch of Yolanda's pen circling a number. "This account," Yolanda said finally, tapping the heading. "You said you thought it was retirement savings." "Robert set it up." Emma wrapped both hands around her coffee mug. "He said it was a long-term investment portfolio. We each contributed automatically every month. I could see the balance, but I never dug into the line items." "Did he have sole management rights?" "He handled the account. I had login access, but he made all the decisions." Emma paused. "I trusted him with it." Yolanda made a sound that wasn't quite a word. She circled something and moved on. "I'm going to need to see more than 2 years," she said. "Can you get me the full history?" "How far back?" Yolanda looked up over her glasses. 6 years. It took them 3 evenings. Emma pulled every statement she could access. Yolanda borrowed a login to a financial analysis tool she used at work and fed the numbers in quietly, at home, off the clock, telling no one. By the second night, the pattern was starting to come clear. It didn't announce itself. That was the thing. It was designed not to. The transfers were small, some of them, labeled as management fees and portfolio rebalancing and administrative costs. The kind of language that meant nothing to someone who wasn't looking. The kind of language that was meant to mean nothing. But taken together, across 6 years, laid out in a column on Yolanda's screen, they added up to something that made Emma's stomach drop. "Look at this," Yolanda said on the third night. She turned the laptop so Emma could see. She had built a simple comparison table, 2 columns side by side. On the left, the transfers out of the joint investment account, dated and totaled by month. On the right, a figure Elijah had pulled. The estimated monthly mortgage payment on the Birchwood Lane property, based on the deed date, the county tax record, and the going rate for that zip code 6 years ago. The 2 columns matched. Not perfectly, not to the dollar, but close enough that it wasn't coincidence. Close enough that it was a plan. Emma stared at the screen for a long time. "He's been using our retirement account," she said slowly, "to pay the mortgage on her house." "On their house," Yolanda said. She said it quietly, but she said it clearly, because Emma needed to hear the whole truth. "His name is on that deed, too." Emma sat back in her chair. She thought about all the times Robert had handled the bills, all the times she had glanced at the account balance, seen it grow, and thought, "We're doing fine." All the times she had handed him that trust because she was busy managing everything else, and he had said, "I've got this, Em, don't worry about it." She thought about what she had believed that money was for. Their future. A house they might buy together one day. Maybe a child, if things ever got better, if she ever stopped feeling like a wound he didn't want to deal with. She had been paying for his other life. She had been paying for the house where another woman believed she was his wife, where a 5-year-old boy called him daddy, where Robert laughed and carried in groceries and dropped his shoes on the floor. She had been paying for all of it. Her jaw tightened. She didn't cry. She had moved past that, somewhere around the second evening, and what was left in its place was something harder and much, much colder. Yolanda reached over and picked up the final printed transaction history from the output tray. She set it on the table in front of Emma and smoothed it flat with one hand. "This isn't a mistake he made once," she said quietly. "This is a plan he's run for years." Emma called Odessa on a Wednesday. She kept her voice warm, easy. She said she had been thinking about her and asked if she wanted to have dinner that Friday, just the 2 of them, while Robert was working late. Odessa said yes before Emma finished the sentence, the way she always did, because Odessa loved nothing more than feeling like the kind of mother-in-law who was also a friend. That had always been her gift, making closeness feel like something she gave you freely, when really it was something she managed very carefully. They met at an Italian place Odessa liked, with low lighting and cloth napkins and a bread basket that arrived before they even opened the menus. Odessa wore a rust-colored blouse and pearl earrings and hugged Emma at the door with both arms, the way she always did. She smelled like the same perfume she had worn for 20 years. "You look thin," Odessa said, pulling back to study Emma's face. "Work's been busy," Emma said. "You look great." They sat down. They ordered. They talked about the easy things first. Odessa's neighbor's ongoing war with a raccoon, a home renovation show they both watched, the price of groceries. Odessa poured herself a second glass of wine before the entrees arrived. Emma watched and waited. She had learned that about Odessa. The woman talked more when she felt comfortable, when she felt like the evening was hers. So Emma gave her that feeling. She laughed at the right moments, asked follow-up questions, leaned forward when Odessa spoke. She gave her the whole room. It wasn't until they were almost through their pasta that Emma said, casually, stirring a piece of bread through the sauce on her plate, "I was thinking about a few years back. That October, I think it was 4 years ago now, when I lost the pregnancy. Odessa's fork slowed. I remember that, honey. Her voice dropped. That was such a hard time. It was, Emma said. She kept her tone soft, reflective, not accusing. Robert couldn't get back right away. You said he was with your cousin. Down in Georgia, you said. Odessa reached for her wine. I remember because I was alone for almost 5 days. Emma let that sit for just a second. I kept thinking he'd cut the trip short. Odessa set her glass down. Something had shifted in her expression. Not guilt, exactly, more like a calculation happening just beneath the surface of her face. That trip was hard to get out of, she said. You know how family can be. Which cousin was it? Emma asked, still soft, still easy. I never could remember. A small silence. I believe it was Marcus, Odessa said. Or maybe it was the reunion. Honey, that was years ago. You told me it was Marcus that year, Emma said. But you told me it was the reunion the year before. And the year before that, you said he was with your aunt down in Beaufort. Odessa's chin lifted slightly. The warmth in her face didn't disappear. It just got very still, the way a lake goes still right before something surfaces. Emma? How long have you known Odessa? The question landed without anger, without volume. Emma had said it the same way she would have said, "Can you pass the salt?" Odessa's mouth opened, then closed. She looked down at her plate. That was enough. Emma sat with the silence for a moment, watching the woman across the table rearrange herself into the shape of someone who still had options. But they both knew she didn't. Emma hadn't asked a question she didn't already have the answer to. She had just needed to see whether Odessa would choose honesty when the door was finally open. She didn't. He's my son, Odessa said finally. Her voice was quiet, careful. I didn't want to see him lose everything. Emma nodded once. She thought about herself, alone in the apartment 4 years ago, bleeding through her grief with a heating pad and unanswered calls, while Robert was 2 states away carrying groceries into a house with another woman's name on the mailbox. She thought about Odessa, who had sat with her at that same kitchen table, rubbing her back, saying, "He'll be home soon, sweetheart," knowing the whole time, knowing exactly where he was, knowing exactly what Emma's grief had just been used to cover. She did not say any of that. She folded her napkin and placed it beside her plate. "Thank you for dinner, Odessa," she said. "I'll get the check." She made it to the car before she let herself breathe. She sat in the dark parking lot for a full minute, hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. Then she picked up her phone and dialed Elijah. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, how'd it go?" "She's known for at least 4 years," Emma said. "She staged the alibis, all of them." A beat of silence. "Emma." "I know." She stared at the restaurant's lit-up sign through the windshield. "I want to do this at Thanksgiving, Elijah. At the family dinner. Robert, Odessa, everyone in the same room." Her voice was steady and flat and absolutely certain. "I want every single one of them there when it comes apart." The refinancing papers arrived on a Tuesday. Robert set them on the kitchen counter with the casual ease of a man who had never once worried about what his wife might find if she looked too closely. A thick manila envelope, already opened, the cover page paper-clipped back. He poured himself a glass of water and said, without turning around, "We should get those signed this week. The rate locks in by the 30th. Emma looked at the envelope, then at him. "What is this exactly?" she asked. "Refinance on the primary," he said. "I've been working on it for a while. Locks in a lower rate, frees up some cash." He finally turned around. He was smiling the way he smiled when he wanted something to feel like it was already decided. "Good timing, honestly. Good for both of us." Emma picked up the papers. She turned through a few pages slowly, letting him watch her read. She nodded once or twice, her face giving him nothing but mild interest. "I want to read through all of it first," she said. "You know how I am." Robert laughed. It was an easy, affectionate laugh, the kind that used to make her feel like she was being too careful. "It's straightforward, Emma. It's a refinance, not a federal contract." "Still," she said. She set the papers back down. "Give me a few days," he shrugged. "Don't wait too long." She called Yolanda that same night. "He wants me to sign refinancing papers," Emma said. "Joint, primary residence." "Don't sign anything," Yolanda said immediately. The warmth in her voice was gone, replaced with something sharp and certain. "Not one page." The next morning, Emma called the attorney Yolanda had recommended, a divorce lawyer named Patricia Hale, quiet and methodical, who had built her career on exactly this kind of case. They met twice that week, in an office on the 14th floor of a building downtown, with a view of the city that felt strangely appropriate. Clean lines, clear sight. Patricia reviewed everything: the deed, the transaction history Yolanda had printed, Elijah's records. She was quiet for a long time, going through each page. Then she looked up and said, "He was siphoning from a joint account to fund a separate property. That is actionable. That is not just a divorce. That is financial fraud." Emma nodded. She had known that for weeks, but hearing it said out loud, by someone with a law degree and a notepad, made it real in a different way. "We move to freeze your share of the joint accounts before he can redirect anything else," Patricia said. "I'll file the protective order this week, quietly. He won't know until it's done." "Good," Emma said. Elijah delivered the complete file on a Thursday evening. He sat across from Emma at her kitchen table, the same table where Odessa had once rubbed her back and told her Robert would be home soon, and he laid it out carefully. Printed photographs, the property deed, 6 years of matched transactions, a complete timeline. "This is everything," he said. He looked at her steadily. "Emma, this is airtight." She looked down at the folder, at the photographs on top, Robert in the driveway of that house, Robert with the boy on his shoulders, Robert at a birthday party with his hand on Rochelle's back and a paper crown on his head, like a man without a single thing to hide. "Thank you," she said. Elijah was quiet for a moment. "You sure about Thanksgiving?" "Yes," she said. He nodded. He didn't push. That had always been the thing about Elijah. He knew when a decision was already made. She called Rochelle on a Friday. She had thought about how to do it for days. There was no clean way. There was no easy version of what she had to say, so she kept it simple. "My name is Emma Whitfield," she said when the other woman picked up. "I believe you know Robert Whitfield as your husband." A long silence. "Who is this?" Rochelle's voice was careful, guarded. "I am his legal wife," Emma said. "We have been married for 9 years. I'm not calling to fight with you. I want you to have the truth, the same way I needed it." She paused. "I'd like you to come to the Whitfield family Thanksgiving dinner. I think there are things you deserve to hear in person." Another silence, longer this time. "He has another family dinner?" Rochelle said quietly, almost to herself. "Yes," Emma said. "He does." Rochelle didn't say much after that. She asked where. She asked what time. Her voice had gone flat in a way that Emma recognized, the particular flatness of a person absorbing something too large to react to yet. "I'll be there," Rochelle said. Thanksgiving morning was gray and cold, the kind of morning that felt pressed down, low clouds sitting heavy over everything. Emma stood in her kitchen in the quiet. The evidence folder sat on the counter beside her keys, thick and certain. She looked at it for a moment, her hand resting flat on top of it. Then she picked it up, slipped it into her bag, and walked out to her car. The Whitfield family home was 20 minutes away. Everyone would already be there. The Whitfield house smelled the way it always did in November, roasted meat and cinnamon and something sweet underneath, a candle maybe, or the memory of one. Odessa kept the house warm in a way that felt deliberate, like even the temperature was part of the performance. Gold light from the dining room, the low sound of football from somewhere deeper in the house. A tablecloth pressed so smooth it looked ironed twice. Emma hung her coat by the door and carried her bag into the dining room. Robert was already seated at the head of the table, his chair pushed back slightly, relaxed, the way only a man without a secret thinks he is. He had a glass of wine and his phone face down beside his plate, and he smiled when Emma came in, a wide, easy smile. The real one, or what she had always believed was the real one. "There she is," he said. Odessa came through the kitchen door with a dish in both hands, steam rising off it. She was wearing a cream-colored blouse and earrings that swung when she moved. She looked at Emma warmly, the same warmth she had always shown, practiced and seamless. "Emma, sweetheart, sit down," Odessa said. "Everything's just about ready." Emma sat. She set her bag on the floor beside her chair. She folded her hands on the table. The three of them moved through the beginning of the meal the way families do, passing dishes, commenting on the food, small talk about nothing important. Robert refilled his glass. Odessa talked about a neighbor. Emma answered when she was spoken to, asked one or two polite questions, and ate a few bites. She was waiting. Not for her heart to stop hammering. It had stopped doing that weeks ago, somewhere between the third time she read the transaction records and the morning she walked into Patricia Hale's office with a folder under her arm. The hammering had given way to something else, something quieter and harder. Patience with a purpose. She let the table settle, let the conversation slow, let Robert get comfortable. Let him pour a second glass of wine and lean back in his chair like a man who had nothing to account for. Then she reached into her bag. She set the folder on the table without a word. It landed with a soft, flat sound that cut right through the room. Robert glanced at it. His expression didn't change yet. He didn't know what it was. Odessa's eyes went to it, and then quickly away. And that small, practiced avoidance, told Emma everything she already knew about what Odessa had been doing for 4 years. Emma opened the folder. She placed the property deed first. Flat on the table, turned so Robert could read it. His name, printed cleanly on the line beside Rochelle Boyd's. A house 2 states away, dated 6 years ago. "You've owned that house for 6 years," Emma said. Her voice was level. "You've been paying the mortgage on it for 6 years, out of our joint investment account." Robert looked at the deed. Something shifted in his face. Not guilt, not yet. More like calculation, like a man quietly running numbers. "Emma?" "I'm not finished," she said. She laid down the transaction records next, pages of them, organized by year, the transfers highlighted in yellow, each one matched to a mortgage payment with a neat handwritten note in the margin. Yolanda's work, clean and indisputable. "That account was supposed to be our retirement," Emma said. "For 6 years, you have been taking money out of it every single month and sending it to that house." She looked up at him. "Our money. My money." Robert's jaw tightened. Then she placed the photographs. Robert in the driveway, Robert with the boy on his shoulders, Robert at the birthday party with the paper crown on his head and a grin on his face she had never once seen him aim at her. The room went very quiet. Emma turned to Odessa then. Odessa, who had her hands in her lap and her eyes fixed on the tablecloth. "You've known for 4 years," Emma said, not unkindly, but without softness either. "The Thanksgiving I spent alone after the miscarriage. When I called you and asked where Robert was, and you told me he was with family." She let that sit for a second. "You already knew exactly which family that was." Odessa didn't speak. She pressed her lips together and said nothing, and that silence was its own kind of answer. Then the front door opened. Rochelle Boyd stood in the doorway of the dining room in a gray coat with her hands at her sides. She looked at the table, at the photographs, at Robert. Robert went completely still. He stared at Rochelle and then at Emma, and the color drained from his face as the full shape of it came together. Emma had known. Emma had prepared. Emma had built this moment piece by piece over weeks while he sat in this same house and smiled at her like she was the one who didn't understand how the world worked. His mouth opened. No words came out. Rochelle's eyes moved slowly around the table. She took in Odessa's frozen hands, the papers spread across the white tablecloth. Emma, seated straight and calm at the center of it all. She looked at Emma. "How long has he been doing this, to both of us?" The Monday after Thanksgiving, Emma's lawyer filed the divorce petition. Patricia Hale did it at 9 in the morning, sharp and efficient, the same way she did everything. Emma sat across from her in the clean white office on Mercer Street and watched Patricia sign and date the top sheet with a steady hand. The paperwork was thick. Months of careless transfers and 6 years of a second mortgage will do that. "The fraud claim is strong," Patricia said, sliding a copy across the desk. "Elijah's documentation alone would hold up. Combined with Yolanda's audit, we have a pattern. Not a mistake. A plan." Emma picked up the copy. She looked at Robert's name on the first page, printed clean, just like the deed. "Good," she said. The word got out faster than Robert expected. It always does. Emma hadn't gone looking for anyone to tell. She hadn't needed to. Rochelle had a lawyer of her own within 48 hours of Thanksgiving, and lawyers talk to other lawyers, and paperwork gets filed in courthouses that are public record, and Robert had spent 9 years building a reputation as a charming, trustworthy regional sales VP, which meant the people who felt fooled by him were not quiet about it. By the following Wednesday, his company had placed him on administrative suspension, pending an internal review. The letter cited conduct inconsistent with company values and an ongoing legal matter. Emma heard about it from Elijah, who heard about it from a court filing. She didn't feel satisfaction, exactly. It was more like watching a tower settle after the foundation gave way. Slow, inevitable. Already decided the moment the first stone shifted. Robert called her twice that week. She let both calls go to voicemail. The first message was controlled, almost charming even now, the old Robert trying one more time to talk his way to the center of the room. The second was less controlled. His voice had a ragged edge to it, something she had never heard before, and she deleted it without listening to the end. Odessa called on a Thursday evening. Emma almost didn't answer. She stood in her kitchen holding the phone and watching Odessa's name on the screen until the second-to-last ring, and then she picked up. "Emma?" Odessa's voice was careful, measured, like she was carrying something breakable. "I want you to know I never meant to hurt you." Emma leaned against the counter. The kitchen was quiet. Outside the window, the last of the November light was going gray. "I know you believe that," Emma said. "Robert is my son," Odessa said. "I didn't know what else to do." "You knew what else to do," Emma said, calm, precise. "You knew every time you lied to me. You knew the night I called you from that hospital parking lot after the miscarriage. You knew when you told me Robert was with family." She paused. "You chose. Every single time, you chose him over the truth. That's not something you didn't know how to avoid. That's something you decided." Silence on the line. "I'm sorry, Emma." "I know," Emma said, and she meant it. The apology was real. It was also 4 years too late, and came only after the whole thing had already come apart in Odessa's own dining room. "I think it's best we don't speak for a while," Emma said. She hung up gently. She stood in the kitchen for a long moment. Then she filled a glass of water, drank half of it, and went back to what she had been doing. Rochelle's statement arrived through Patricia's office on the second week of December. Emma didn't read the whole thing. Patricia summarized it in plain terms. Rochelle had confirmed the timeline of the transfers, identified several specific deposits she had seen Robert make into the shared household account, and provided copies of financial records from her own end of the arrangement, records that showed money moving in on the same dates it moved out of Emma's retirement account. "She didn't have to do this," Patricia said. "No," Emma said. "She didn't." Rochelle had her own losses to carry. A relationship that turned out to be a lie, a son who would grow up asking questions about his father that no one had good answers for. She had every reason to stay far away from Emma's case and protect only herself. Instead, she had handed over the exact documentation that closed the last gap in the fraud claim. Emma thought about the question Rochelle had asked at the Thanksgiving table. How long has he been doing this to both of us? The answer, it turned out, was 6 years of transfers, 9 years of October, and a whole life built on the assumption that neither woman would ever compare notes. The settlement signing was on a Thursday in mid-December. Emma arrived early. Patricia's office was warm and smelled like coffee. Emma sat at the long conference table with a cup in front of her and waited while Robert was escorted in by his own lawyer, a man in a gray suit who kept his eyes low. Robert looked smaller than she remembered. Not physically. He still had the same height, the same broad shoulders, but something in the way he carried himself had gone quiet. The ease was gone. The relaxed backward lean was gone. He sat across from Emma and didn't quite meet her eyes, and she understood that the thing Robert had always relied on, the smile, the charm, the sheer force of his confidence, had nothing left to push against. The settlement left him financially diminished. The fraud findings redirected a significant portion of his assets to cover what had been drained from the joint accounts over 6 years. His income, already interrupted by the suspension, was now subject to 2 separate legal proceedings. The life he had built so carefully in both directions was, in both directions, coming apart. Emma uncapped her pen. She signed her name where Patricia indicated, clear and even. Her hand didn't shake. 1 year later, Emma owned her front door. That was the thing she noticed most, on an ordinary Tuesday morning in early October, standing in the doorway of her house with a coffee mug in both hands and the cool air moving in off the street. She owned the door. She owned the frame it hung in, and the porch it opened onto, and the yard beyond that, and every room behind her. No joint account, no shared deed, no other name on the paperwork. Just hers, bought outright 3 months after the divorce finalized, in a neighborhood she had picked herself, on a street quiet enough to think on. The house was small. It didn't need to be large. It just needed to be hers. She had been promoted in the spring. Vice President of Operations announced at an all-staff meeting on a Thursday morning in April. Her team had started a small, embarrassing round of applause before the meeting was officially over, and Emma had stood at the front of the room and felt something loosen inside her chest. Not relief exactly, more like the feeling of setting down something she had been carrying for a long time without noticing how heavy it was. She was good at the job. She had always been good at it. The difference now was that she believed it, without having to argue herself into it first. Yolanda had taken her to dinner that night, just the two of them, a corner booth at the Italian place on 5th that they had been going to since their first year at the company. Yolanda had ordered the expensive wine and slid the menu aside and looked at Emma with the particular expression she reserved for moments she wanted to mark. "You were always going to end up here," Yolanda said. Emma smiled. "I needed the year to catch up to that." "Well," Yolanda said, lifting her glass, "you're caught up." Elijah came by on a Saturday in September, the weekend before Emma finished unpacking the last 2 boxes. He stood in the middle of the living room with his hands in his jacket pockets and looked around at the bookshelves and the afternoon light coming in through the front window and nodded, slowly, the way he did when something confirmed what he had already suspected. "It suits you," he said. "It does," Emma said. He stayed for lunch. They ate sandwiches on the back porch and talked about everything except Robert, which felt right. At some point, Elijah mentioned, briefly and without ceremony, that Robert had missed his second restitution payment, and his lawyer had filed for an extension. His company had not reinstated him. His name had moved quietly out of professional circles the way a tide moves out, not with a crash, but with a slow and total withdrawal. Emma listened. She nodded. She didn't feel triumph. What she felt was closer to accuracy, like a long equation finally coming out to the number it was always supposed to reach. She thought about it sometimes, how it had actually worked. Not the Thanksgiving dinner, though that had been necessary, not the documents or the fraud claim or the settlement, though all of those had mattered. What she thought about was the years before any of that, the 9 Octobers she had spent pushing her unease back down and accepting Robert's explanations, because she had been told, again and again, in words and in silence, that her instincts were too much, that she was too sensitive, that she read things wrong and felt things too hard, and the problem was always the receiver, never the signal. He had used her patience against her. He had used her grief against her. He had counted on her need for peace to be stronger than her need for truth. He had miscalculated, because the same patience he had turned into a weakness was exactly what let her sit in a motel room in a city she had never been to and plan instead of collapse. The same attention to detail he had dismissed was what filled the folder on Yolanda's kitchen table with 6 years of evidence. The same refusal to confront without proof that he had mistaken for passivity was what made the Thanksgiving table undeniable. Every quality he had underestimated in her had been, quietly and precisely, the instrument of his undoing. October arrived the way it always did, a sharpness in the air, leaves going gold at the edges, the particular slant of afternoon light that had, for 9 years, carried the small, familiar weight of watching Robert pack a bag. Emma packed her own. She had booked the trip in August. Portugal, a place she had wanted to go since her late 20s, set aside first for finances, then for timing, then for all the shapeless reasons that turn into years if you let them. She wasn't going with anyone. She wasn't going to meet anyone or follow anyone or look for anything other than the particular feeling of a city she had never seen before, in a country where no one knew her name. She zipped the suitcase and rolled it to the front door. The house was quiet behind her, clean and warm and entirely hers. She picked up her keys, stepped out onto the porch, and pulled the door shut behind her. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe and turn on notifications. I've got 2 stories on the screen that you have to watch next. Have a great day!